May 19, 1944, north of Bougainville. Midnight water. A room the size of a truck, red lights breathing like an animal. The paper in my hands is thin, navy stock, salt-faded at the edges. You can still smell the carbon ribbon in its letters. 0150 hours, contact, speed 6 knots, depth unknown, Hedgehog prepared. That's all it says at first. No names, no faces, just a heartbeat on paper. In the cramped Combat Information Center of USS England, Lieutenant Commander Walton Pendleton, 37 years old, first war patrol as CO, leans close to the sonar hood. The operator's chin barely clears the rim of the set. He keeps his voice flat so the needle in someone else's hand won't shake. Steady contact, bearing constant, range closing. Outside, the Pacific is a lid of black glass. Inside, the ship sounds like a pocket watch, gear, fan, breath. England isn't a big killer built for headlines. She's a Buckley-class destroyer Escort, 77 feet shorter than the sleek destroyers every recruiting poster loves. Half her crew is barely shaving. But the thing that sets her apart isn't the hull. It sits on her foredeck like a rake left against a wall, 24 stubby spigots pointing at tomorrow. Hedgehog, a forward-throwing mortar. It doesn't thunder like depth charges. It doesn't make the sea boil or the crew cheer. It does something worse. It waits. 24 contact-fused bombs arc 200 yards ahead, slip under the skin of the ocean, and fall in a circle big enough to swallow a house. If they hit steel, they explode. If they miss, they say nothing at all. Silence is a verdict. Depth charges are tradition. You roll them off the stern, you set a hope into the fuse, and you pray the submarine is still where you guessed when the water crushes the casing. Tradition has a sound to it. A proof. Hedgehog has math. Pendleton trusts math. He knows the figure nobody wants to print big. 1 confirmed kill for scores of old-fashioned attacks. Sonar deaf for minutes after each blast. The ocean turned to static while the enemy escapes into the alphabet of currents. He also knows a line from a different room 4 days earlier. Fleet Radio Unit Pacific teased meaning out of Japanese code and found a name, I-16, and a route and a time. You can almost hear the radio paper crinkle when you say it aloud. Patrol line to Marianas, arrival 2200, 19 May. Now the clock in England's CIC ticks louder, as if the hull is listening too. Range, 1500 yards, target changing depth. The operator's hand edges the gain. A pencil taps. A sailor swallows. The ocean presses its ear to the ship. Execute first pattern, Pendleton says. The deck crew already knows the drill. Hands move without adjectives. Load, check, safe off. Outside, 24 dull noses lift like a pack animal scenting something you can't see yet. On command, England's bow breathes fireflies. Projectiles flick away, arching out in a hiya. Patient circle, then fold into the black. 1 Mississippi, 2, 9, nothing. No applause, no echo. Just the scratch of a pencil adding a small subtraction to a sheet of ammunition counts. Miss. If you were on a bigger ship, someone might say a comfortable thing. We scared him. But scare isn't a measurement. In Pendleton's head, a different ledger updates. Sink rate, target maneuverability, predicted turn radius, time to next solution. He doesn't curse the darkness, he plots it. Range 1200, bearing steady. He's trying to shake us with depth changes. The second pattern goes. 24 small futures arc and fall. A beat. 1 explosion. It's not theatrical. It's a thud that moves in through your boots and up your bones. A single note that raises the hair at the base of the skull, because for a fraction of a second the ocean remembers there is a skeleton beneath it. Hit. Not kill. A smear of oil doesn't rise. No wreckage bumps the keel. Somewhere below, a Japanese captain turns his wheel 30 degrees and writes a prayer into the water with his wake. The men at England's plot table don't know his words, but they know his handwriting. Submarines don't run straight when they're hunted. They zig because zigging makes a human on another ship doubt his numbers. Third pattern, Pendleton says. Silence answers, then a hiss of breath around the room. No, not yet. The fathometer whispers the real trouble. The target went deeper, beyond what Pendleton estimated, beyond what a cautious man would prefer to chase. The Pacific is simple. in the way cliffs are simple. You don't argue with it. You understand it quickly or not at all. Fourth pattern, miss. Time stretches in CICs. A minute is a carpet that can roll either way, toward a report someone will frame or toward a letter someone will fold in a pocket they won't empty. The fifth pattern leaves the ship like a held-back sentence finally spoken. 3 seconds of nothing. Then 4 detonations. Then 6. Then something that makes language look for another room to stand in. A bloom below the keel, a pressure wave that lifts England's stern as if a hand rose out of history and tried to pick her up. Men grab whatever is nailed down. Someone's pencil skates off the page and leaves a mark the archivist won't understand. Silence again, this time the kind that follows an answer. Oil will come later. So will canvas, wood, a shard you could cut a thumb on, and the knowledge, heavy as a secret, that 107 men are not coming back up through that black door. The operator clears his throat and says the only sentence that makes sense when the sea agrees with your math. Contact faded. If this is where the story ended, it would be enough. 1 ship, 1 submarine, 1 hard-won proof that a quiet weapon could erase a louder one. But the Pacific doesn't schedule epilogues. Code rooms don't sleep. Before England's crew finishes counting the first, oil slicks rainbow. Another message is already moving through wires and hands. 7 more Japanese submarines, a picket line across a road the Americans meant to take. A destroyer escort is not supposed to hunt a week of ghosts and catch them one by one. That's the anomaly. That's the file nobody wrote a headline for. And that's where we begin. Not with a victory, but with a question that smells like ink and salt. If silence can kill faster than thunder, who will believe the math before the bodies float? The next morning, the Pacific looks almost kind. The kind of flat blue that lies to new sailors. It says nothing bad ever happened here. But beneath that mirror, somewhere below the oil that still rises in slow, lazy veins, there is a question floating upward. Why this ship? 5,000 depth charge attacks across 2 oceans, and not 1 destroyer escort in the entire U.S. Navy has ever done what England just did in a single night. 1 kill, 1st patrol, 1st captain. Every other report in this war starts with a list of excuses: lost contact, evasive maneuvers, false echo. England's report begins with a verb: destroyed. Pendleton doesn't celebrate. He watches the sonar operator reset the dials, then looks down at the map table, thin pencil lines marking where an invisible enemy died, and he just says, "Reload Hedgehog." Because math doesn't care about applause, it only cares about repetition. To understand why that line of ink means so much, you have to know what the other captains still believe. For 30 years, the destroyer's religion has been thunder. The sound of depth charges rolling off the stern, the shockwave that throws coffee cups against the bulkhead, the roar that tells the crew they're fighting. Tradition sounds heroic. Hedgehog sounds wrong, too quiet, too patient. The thing Pendleton trusts is smaller than faith, a 24-tube mortar that throws its teeth forward, not behind. Forward means you can keep sonar contact. You don't blind yourself with your own explosions. Forward means you can think while you kill. But the Navy hates new arithmetic. They call it unproven. They call it British. They call it a waste of deck space. On paper, early trials gave the Hedgehog a 5% success rate, 1 kill every 20 attempts. Pendleton had read those reports before he ever left port. He wrote small numbers in the margin, ratios he believed could change if you removed guesswork, if you treated the sea like a graph instead of a grave. Now, in his log, the ratio has a pulse. 1 submarine destroyed in 5 attacks, 20%. Not faith, not luck, data. The message that leaves his ship that night travels through static and disbelief. Admirals who never saw salt water between their boots read it under fluorescent light. New weapon used with success. Recommend continued trial. Trial, not trust. Out here, trial means more hunting. The Japanese. Imperial Navy has stretched a net across the route to the Marianas. 7 submarines in a line so precise it looks drawn by compass. Pendleton's small destroyer escort, along with 2 sisters, George and Raby, will now sweep north through that net. The men don't know those names. RO 104, RO 105, RO 106, and the others. Yet. They just know the feeling that creeps into a room after you've killed something once and realize you'll be asked to do it again. Pendleton stands on the bridge that night, eyes half closed against the wind. He doesn't look like the movie kind of commander. No cigarette, no swagger. He's quiet in the way chalk is quiet before it solves a problem. The crew watches him and learns silence can be an order. He calls for sonar drills every hour. Range estimates, echo returns, turning angles. The ocean becomes a classroom. The students are 19, 20, 21. They learn that sound travels faster in warm water, that a ship's own heartbeat can drown its ears. They learn patience is a weapon. Somewhere to the north, 7 submarines breathe through thin straws, thinking they're invisible. But the ocean keeps score for whoever listens long enough. By May 22nd, the first echo arrives. RO 106 on the surface, recharging batteries, unaware that radar has already found her. She dives, exactly as textbooks say she should, but textbooks weren't written for men who've seen the pattern once before. Pendleton doesn't guess. He calculates. Range, speed, sink rate, time. 9 seconds from splash to detonation depth. The first pattern misses. The second lands like punctuation. 3 detonations, then a fourth that bends knees and makes lungs forget their rhythm. When daylight comes, the water blooms with oil again. Another confirmation, another subtraction. 2 submarines gone in 24 hours. Somewhere in the Pacific, Admiral Ernest King, the man who commands every U.S. ship afloat, will soon read this report and write a sentence that tastes like prophecy. There'll always be an England. But Pendleton doesn't know that yet. He just knows the numbers. FAP-24 depth charge attacks, 85 kills, 1 success for every 60 tries. England, 2 kills in roughly 10, 1 in 5 and 25 times more efficient. The math is obscene. And here's the anomaly. No one else can repeat it. Not yet, because the secret isn't in the weapon. It's in the mind using it. Pendleton isn't chasing submarines. He's chasing certainty. Every sonar ping is a question. Every silence is an answer. He's about to turn that rhythm into something the ocean has never heard before. Precision. And if you stand close enough to his chart table, you can almost hear him whisper the only prayer a mathematician ever says at sea. Not, God help us, but let the numbers be true. By the time England's wake smoothed over the second oil slick, the ocean had already erased its evidence. Only the men aboard remembered the sound. The deep, heavy thump that didn't echo so much as settle into their bones. But in Washington and Pearl Harbor, the reports didn't sound like miracles. They sounded like paperwork. 2 kills in 2 days. Unverified, some typed. Possibly same target, others added in pencil, because new math never travels well through old corridors. The Navy didn't run on imagination. It ran on hierarchy, on precedent. Tradition was safer than truth. And tradition said destroyer escorts were expendable, temporary. You didn't learn from them, you used them. Admiral Ernest King, Chief of Naval Operations, had read every victory report since 1941. He knew numbers could lie as easily as men. The Atlantic was full of confirmed kills that later turned out to be whales or drifting drums. So when Pendleton's name hit his desk, it was one line among hundreds. But down in the Pacific, where static tasted like salt and sweat, there was no mistaking what Hedgehog had done. The weapon was changing everything, not through power, but through precision. Yet, precision was an insult to ego. Pendleton's superiors had grown up worshipping the thunder of depth charges. It was the sound of victory, the sound that shook the deck and told men they were doing something. Hedgehog robbed them of that comfort. It replaced drama with data. And data doesn't make you feel heroic, it just makes you right. In the crew's mess, the younger sailors whispered about it. They called Hedgehog the ghost gun. The older ones said it was bad luck, that the ocean didn't like quiet killing. But the ones who stood near Pendleton on the bridge started to believe. They saw how he listened more than he spoke, how he treated the sonar pings like sentences from a language only he could read. He didn't teach them superstition, he taught them arithmetic. You don't fire at sound, he said one night, hands resting on the map table lit red beneath his fingers. You fire ahead of it. You fire where he's going to be, not where he is. That sentence became gospel aboard England. Across the fleet, captains were still guessing. Pendleton was predicting. But prediction isn't loyalty. In a system built on rank and repetition, innovation looks like disobedience. Every time England sent in another attack report, someone on shore looked for a flaw, some reason to remind the sea who was really in charge. In the archives today, you can still see their skepticism written between the lines. Further verification required, pending additional evidence. As if oil slicks could lie. It wasn't just the Navy's structure that resisted him, it was its memory. The last war had taught officers to trust explosions. Submarines then had been slower, louder. Now they were ghosts. Hedgehog wasn't about brute strength, it was about listening. Listening is harder to reward. Pendleton didn't complain. He didn't write editorials. He just kept calculating. When his crew slept, he stayed in the CIC, red pencil scratching numbers on the margin of sonar logs. Speeds, sink rates, course corrections. On one page, his handwriting grows smaller until it becomes a list of decimals, a quiet proof that would outlive him. It's strange to think about it now. One man and a weapon no one trusted, rewriting a Navy's doctrine in the middle of an ocean that didn't care. By May 23rd, his destroyer group, England, George, and Raby, was closing on the NA line. 7 Japanese submarines, perfectly spaced, north of the Admiralty Islands. Their orders were simple: detect American carriers and radio positions back to Japan. Nothing dramatic, just observation. But observation is exactly what Pendleton was best at. That night, radar caught another contact, RO-104, 22,000 yards. Too far to see, close enough to guess. Raby fired first, missed. George followed, missed again. The ocean went quiet, smug. Then came the radio call from Division Commander Hamilton Haynes, his voice crackling over static. Oh, hell. Go ahead, England. 3 minutes later, Hedgehog spoke. 10 detonations, so close together the recorder couldn't count them separately. The sound rolled through the water like a single word said 6 times at once. Silence after that. Oil at sunrise. Kill number 3. In 3 days, the Navy's unproven weapon had erased 3 submarines. Haynes didn't write about skepticism in his next report. He wrote one sentence that every sailor still quotes in training schools. If there's anything left to find, let England find it. But inside England's log, Pendleton still didn't sound triumphant. He didn't even mention the phrase record. He wrote something quieter. Pattern consistent. Crew performance above average. Recommend continued training. That's the sentence of a man who knows victory isn't applause. It's repetition. Still, somewhere beneath the precision, there's a hint of something else. A man aware that he's becoming an experiment. When an institution doubts you, it doesn't hate your success. It fears it. Because every time you prove them wrong, they have to admit they didn't listen soon enough. Hedgehog wasn't just a weapon. It was a question the Navy didn't want to answer. Could discipline replace luck? Could math replace thunder? Pendleton was proving it, line by line, with each explosion no one believed until the next one came. There is a rhythm to hunting in deep water. It isn't heroic. It isn't loud. It's arithmetic learning to breathe. Ping, return, correction, launch, wait. England doesn't chase glory across whitecaps. She inches through a graph only a few men can see. The sonar scope glows like a moon cut into quarters. A pencil ticks time in the margin of a plotting sheet. Somewhere below, a submarine captain tries to make his noise sound like the ocean's noise. Somewhere above, men try to make their fear sound like routine. The math is simple on paper and cruel in practice. A Hedgehog bomb falls through seawater at 23 feet per second. At 300 feet, it needs 13 seconds. At 400, 17. A submarine at 6 knots travels almost 10 feet per second. In 17 seconds, it can move 170 feet, enough to step outside a circle of explosions drawn for where it was. Prediction is the only mercy they have. So Pendleton trains prediction like a muscle. He stands over the plot, not rushing, not dragging, letting the numbers speak. He'll turn inside our last pattern, he says softly, and the men around him stop breathing long enough to hear the sentence land. Lead by 200 feet, shallow by 30. The firing circuit clacks. 24 dull noses tip forward. A ripple of air moves across the foredeck like the ship exhaled. Outside, nothing is dramatic. Inside, everything is. England's hull quivers, not from blast, but from waiting. Waiting is the moral test the ocean gives to the living. 9, 10, 11, a single detonation arrives like a metal fist knocking under the floorboards. Not a kill, not yet, but a proof. The sonar operator doesn't look up. Possible hull strike, he says, and the words are so flat they sound like mercy being careful. Men are not flat. Men crack jokes with dry mouths. Men pinch the bridge of the nose where the headache burns. Men imagine faces they can't call by name. But the discipline Pendleton builds is a scaffold the fear can't climb. No shouting, no victory songs, just again. Forward throwing means they can keep listening while they attack. Depth charges would blind them in their own thunder. 10, 12, 15 minutes of meaningless echoes. Hedgehog lets the conversation continue. The ocean speaks. England answers. The enemy tries to make its language sound like silence. On the third day, the crew begins to trust the math with the kind of trust usually reserved for saints. Not because it never misses, it does, but because every miss teaches and every hit proves. They see the pattern, surface at night, dive at dawn, radical turns under pressure, battery limits that force a choice between silence and survival. Numbers are honest about limits. People aren't. Somewhere near the Admiralty's RO-116 tries a new kind of defiance, staying shallow when everyone else goes deep. It's a gambler's trick. Make the Americans think in big numbers and live in small ones. Pendleton doesn't blink. Shallow pattern, he says. He's betting we won't believe our own ears. 3 detonations answer like taps on a coffin. No spectacle, just holes a few inches wide, welcoming 400 pounds of pressure per square inch to come inside and rearrange the room. Flooding does the arithmetic no man wants to do. Weight increases, buoyancy falters, angle steepens, pumps fail, lungs burn. England keeps station. They do not cheer the physics. Human cost doesn't vanish because the numbers are correct. Inside England, heat gathers where the red lights live. Coffee goes cold because hands are busy. A bosun's mate peels tape from the last intact roll for a cable that won't behave. The cook sends up bread that tastes like nerves and diesel. Someone scratches a date into paint with a thumbnail, as if time will stick if you carve it. A young signalman breaks once, just once. After a near hit rattles his teeth, he whispers, "What if we're wrong?" And no one rebukes him. Pendleton answers without turning his head. "Then we learn, mister. We don't guess twice." The line doesn't make anyone braver. It makes them steady. Steady is what brings men home. Between patterns, the ocean performs its oldest trick. It pretends to be infinite. The scope shows nothing but room. The operator benches the gain until a hairline of echo appears. He nurses it like a match in wind. Weak contact, bearing 172, depth 350 and trending. Trending. A human word for a mechanical truth. It's how the crew keeps their humanity without losing their edge. They talk in quiet plural nouns because singular pronouns feel too large. We launch, we listen, we correct. No one says I, not even when they're right. The 4th day bleeds into the 5th. England has spent ammunition like breath and still keeps enough to speak again. The numbers on the ammunition sheet fall toward a line that looks like a dare. Hedgehog rounds carried, 240. Patterns fired, too many. Patterns left, not enough. The crew counts them the way a runner counts heartbeats left in a last lap. Night is kinder to math than day. Glare is the enemy of a scope. In darkness, returns are truer and fear is louder. Pendleton lets the fear have a chair in the room, not the table. He puts the table under numbers. "Speed change," he murmurs, almost to himself. He's trying to walk us off the circle. He draws a little arc on the paper with a pencil that's more eraser than wood. He turns every 4 minutes. The sonar operator blinks. He starts his stopwatch. 4 minutes, 30 degrees to port. 4 minutes, 30 starboard. Not random then, human. And the cruelty of math shows up wearing a kind face. If you can predict a man trying not to be a pattern, you can end his pattern forever. "Lead by 200, Pendleton says. Fire. 24 arcs lift against a sky no one will remember. They fall into a ring timed drew. 4 detonations arrive too close to count. The deck heaves. Somewhere under the keel, a hull decides not to be a room anymore. Silence. No cheer, no exhale big enough to be called relief. Just the small rearrangements of men returning to their tasks. A mark on a chart, a note in a margin, a hand that shakes for a second and then doesn't. Cold calculation brought them here. Human patience kept them alive. The sum is uglier than either addend alone. 6 dozen men. They will never meet, stilled by a choice made in a red-lit room with a pencil and a watch. Math doesn't apologize. It doesn't gloat. It just balances. England steadies on course. The next contact will bring the next lesson. And the next one after that will ask the question all arithmetic eventually asks the living. How much certainty can you bear before it turns into weight? They will find out soon in a night that shrinks around a single hard problem called RO 105, the moment when the numbers and the men reach the same thin edge and step together. May 31st, 1944. The Pacific before dawn is a mirror turned over, black swallowing black. On England's bridge, every man is awake, though no one says much. The air tastes like metal and rain that never fell. Somewhere in that darkness, one last submarine still breathes. RO 105, the only survivor of 7, 56 men inside, and England with just 72 Hedgehog rounds left. The hunt has become something personal now. Not hatred, not revenge, but completion. When a pattern repeats this many times, it stops being luck and starts being law. At 02:15, the sonar ping returns faint and uneven. Weak contact, bearing 178, range 2,000 yards. Pendleton's eyes don't leave the plot. The pencil in his hand trembles slightly against the vibration of the deck. He doesn't chase the echo. He waits for it to breathe. Mark course, record drift. The submarine isn't moving much. It's hiding, dead quiet, pretending to be a shadow. But even shadows drift. For 4 hours, England drifts too, like a hunter forced to listen to his own heartbeat. Nothing moves but the needles. No one coughs. A cigarette goes out between 2 fingers, smoke swallowed by red light. Contact fading. Hold your range, Pendleton murmurs. He'll move. He has to. He's right. Submarines can't play dead forever. Batteries die. Air goes stale. Men inside start to taste copper in their mouths, the warning that oxygen is running out. They must surface or suffocate. At 03:15, radar flares to life. Surface contact, bearing 12,000 yards, new position. The submarine has surfaced 3 miles off, sucking air, desperate. In the brief window between breaths, she's visible, a dark smudge against darker water. But England isn't pointed that way. She's been searching the wrong square. For 90 seconds, the ocean is chaos. Engines reverse, compasses swing, orders fly without shouting. The crew moves like a single body remembering an old dance. The submarine dives again, but she's already been seen. England turns, correcting her heartbeat to match the targets. At 03:45, sonar regains the whisper. Contact re-established, range 1600, depth 400, speed 6 knots, running fast. RO 105 is trying to break away, engines whining underwater like something praying through machinery. Pendleton draws a circle on the chart. The kill. Radius of a hedgehog pattern. His pencil lands on a point just outside it. He doesn't frown. He adjusts. Set for 400. Lead by 200 feet. Ready pattern 1. The first salvo arcs through the dark. 24 projectiles vanish into the water, falling through the depth where sound bends. 17 seconds pass. No explosions. Miss. The submarine has turned. Pendleton doesn't blink. Reload. 4:23. Second attack. Same calm tone. Same waiting silence. This time the explosions come late, scattered, like stones skipping once before sinking. The echo is wrong. Off by a heartbeat. Another miss. England's log will later call this standard procedure. But inside the CIC, everyone can feel it. Something changing. The submarine isn't just running. It's learning. Every failed pattern eats into the magazine to 24, 48, 72 rounds spent. The arithmetic of patience grows thin. The operator whispers, He's varying speed. 6 knots, now 4, back to 6, trying to throw off the solution. Pendleton's pencil pauses mid-air. He's human, he says. Humans fall into rhythm. Start the watch. They listen, not to the ocean, to time itself. 4 minutes pass. The bearing swings 30 degrees port. Another 4. 30 starboard. Again. A pattern inside chaos. He thinks he's random, Pendleton says quietly. But nobody is. He adjusts the firing solution forward 200 feet, shallow by 10. Pattern 3. Fire. The deck shakes once, a solid, grounded thump that feels more like inevitability than impact. 4 detonations, then 5 more. The sound fuses into one continuous roar, like the sea deciding to speak all at once. Then a final concussion that lifts England's stern, slamming her back into the water. No one moves. No one cheers. Sonar says it first, breaking up noises. They listen. It's not the cinematic kind of explosion. It's the slow, hollow sound of steel losing its argument with pressure. A series of metallic groans, bulkheads folding in, the quiet music of men running out of air. At 0615, oil surfaces. Not much, just a thin film spreading wide, catching the morning light in colors too beautiful for what they mean. Contact lost, permanently. RO-105, destroyed. 6 submarines in 12 days, 335 Japanese sailors gone, 1 destroyer escort still afloat, half her ammunition spent, and a silence in her hull that feels like something the sea itself might salute. Pendleton exhales. His shoulders drop for the first time in nearly 2 weeks. "Secure from sonar," he says. No one answers. They just stare at the flickering sonar screen, still showing a ghost echo, fading down into nothing. There's a moment after every kill where relief doesn't know if it's allowed. This is that moment. The men aren't proud. They're stunned at how precise death can be when you give it rules. Later, when the sun climbs, the air smells of oil and burnt insulation. The deck crew leans over the rail, staring at the film spreading across the water. A seaman mutters, "Feels like we just erased a page out of the world." Pendleton doesn't reply. He's looking east, toward the rising light, toward a future that will never know their names. Because in war, the closer you get to perfection, the faster you disappear. He knows this isn't luck anymore. It's mathematics weaponized, and mathematics, once proven, belongs to the system, not to the man who solved it. Somewhere in the static of distant radios, his report is already being typed. RO-105 destroyed. Hedgehog effective. Recommend standardization across fleet. No one adds the line that should come after, at cost of every silence learned here. Pendleton turns from the horizon. "All ahead 1/3, he says. England moves forward, her bow cutting through what remains of the record she just set. The ocean closes behind her like it always does, pretending nothing ever happened. But for 12 days, the Pacific was a chalkboard, and one quiet man wrote proof on it in oil and fire. Proof that precision could outthink chaos. No one else would ever do it again. And in that silence after the last explosion, in that still, airless room of water and memory, the truth settles like silt. The greatest victories are the ones no one can afford to repeat. Dawn breaks soft the morning after RO-105. The ocean pretends to be new again, like it didn't just swallow a city of steel in the dark. England's decks are washed down. The smell of oil lingers anyway. Men sleep in fragments. Pens run out of ink over forms that try to make days like these fit into boxes. The message climbs the ladder of radios, relays, clerks, 6 submarines, 12 days. Hedgehog effective. Somewhere far ashore, fluorescent lights hum over desks that don't pitch and roll. A typist pauses on a sentence, looks at the verb and moves on. The sentence that comes back down is short enough to fit in a headline and big enough to feel like myth. There'll always be an England. Admiral Ernest King writes it after reading the action reports, and the line sprints through wardrooms like electricity. Sailors grin, signalmen pass it hand to hand. For a moment, language keeps pace with what happened, but praise has a twin, protection. With 6 kills inked in, orders follow that don't sound like victory. England is too valuable to keep in the hunt, someone decides. Pull her off the line. Reassign to carrier screen. Write the doctrine from her wake, but don't let her make another one. It's how institutions survive their own proofs. They hoist the banner, then fold the spear. The weapon goes fleet-wide fast. Training syllabi thicken. New handouts teach sonar crews to maintain contact during attack instead of blind themselves with their own thunder. Firing tables update, sync rates, lead distances, target turn bias, all cribbed. From a red-lit room, where a pencil and a stopwatch earned the right to be called strategy. Simulators adopt England's timing. Instructors quote Haynes, "Oh hell, go ahead, England." They perform the line like theater so the next lieutenant will trust the math sooner. Across 2 oceans, Hedgehog starts talking in a voice the sea respects. U-boats die to quiet arithmetic. Japanese skippers learn to fear circles they can't hear. Reports stack up, stamped, initialed, filed. But the ship that taught the Navy to listen is told to be quiet again. Summer 1944 turns busy in a different way. Escort duty, screen the fast carriers, protect the big names that history already knows how to remember. England runs stations like a metronome, steady, precise, invisible by design. You don't make headlines for the calamities you prevent. October 31st, 1944, the calendar's cruel symmetry. A kamikaze slashes through sky over Leyte Gulf and chooses a small destroyer escort as the sentence to end. The bomb blows through England's forward engine room. Metal unknits. Heat takes the air away. 37 men die. 24 more wear burns that will reappear in their sleep for decades. The same ship that could solve a submarine's position with a stopwatch can't solve a plane falling out of a white sun. There isn't an equation for that. Tugs pull her to anchorage. Men with clipboards do the other math. Repair estimates, material availability, yard capacity, the grim ledger the rear always keeps on the front. The number that decides a ship's fate has nothing to do with courage. It's cost. Repairs will take longer and cost more than building another escort from scratch. The sentence that follows ends a story no one is ready to tell out loud. Strike her, strip her, sell her. They take what can be used, the radios, the compass repeaters, the fittings, and leave the hull to a yard where torchlight is the last sunrise she'll see. In November 1946, England is cut into manageable truths. Plate, beam, box, scrap. The Pacific does not attend. It has already forgotten her shape. Doctrine doesn't. Doctrine fattens on what she taught. By September 44, Hedgehog is standard. By 45, the Atlantic's kill sheets prove it beyond argument. Forward throwing becomes the new tradition. The young officers who never felt a depth charge erase their sonar, think this is how it's always been. They pass the gospel without the ghost. The small, rust-spotted Hedgehog mount that once pointed at tomorrow ends up in a museum storehouse in Washington. Curators mean well. Budgets don't. The placard talks about forward-thrown contact-fused projectiles and a significant improvement in anti-submarine warfare. It forgets to say England out loud. It forgets to say Pendleton. It forgets to say 12 days. Visitors drift by, looking for the big ships, the famous silhouettes. Battleships get postcards. Carriers get gift shop mugs. Destroyer escorts get a shelf. The Navy keeps its promise, sort of. In 1960, a New England, a CG-22, joins the line, a guided missile cruiser that serves 3 decades under a name that still tastes like salt and certainty. She retires in 1994. The promise goes quiet with her. There'll always be an England, the line said. There wasn't after that. The record stands anyway. No ship kills 6 submarines in 12 days again, not in the Atlantic with its gray, not in the Pacific with its black, not in the stories told in bars where truth is tuned for laughter. The statistic sits in books like a reef. You can sail over it, but it will scrape the paint off the bottom of any exaggeration. When history forgets, it doesn't do it all at once. It fades edges first. The numbers stay. The names blur. 6 subs, May 44. People nod. They don't ask who drew the circle that closed around RO 105. They don't ask who wrote lead by 200 in a margin while the ship shook. They don't ask which 19-year-old kept the echo alive on a scope by nursing gain with a thumb that wouldn't stop trembling. That's how cover-ups work when nobody plans them. The system praises the results until the people who made them are small enough to misplace. Pendleton doesn't lobby for a monument. He takes another command, hunts a sea that runs out of prey, retires after 3 decades in uniform. His stone at Arlington says Navy Cross. It does not say, proved the ocean could be measured in seconds and saved men by subtraction. Stones don't have room for that kind of arithmetic. If you want a monument, you can stand in a museum storehouse and look at a rusted hedgehog and imagine 24 small futures arcing into dark water. You can touch the cold metal and feel, faintly, what a red-lit room once knew. That precision is a kind of compassion, the refusal to waste guesses when lives are being counted. And if you listen hard enough in that quiet, you might hear the sentence the official reports never wrote, but every man aboard England learned by heart. Progress remembers the weapon. We remember the crew. The difference between those two memories is everything that gets lost. Arlington National Cemetery, Section 46. The stone is small, squared, unremarkable, the kind a man of numbers might have chosen himself. Walton Bruce Pendleton, U.S. Navy, Navy Cross. That's it. No mention of the ship, no mention of the 12 days that made him the most successful submarine hunter in history. The grass around the stone doesn't care about statistics. The wind doesn't remember equations. But if you stand there long enough, you can still hear the hum of something that once was pure calculation made human. A rhythm of pings, breaths, and decisions that kept men alive. There's a kind of mercy in how the world forgets. It spares you from having to live next to your own record, but there's also a kind of betrayal, because the silence that follows every achievement sounds exactly like the silence that follows defeat. Pendleton never argued with it. He never wrote a memoir or lectured about what he'd proven. Maybe because he understood that the moment a discovery becomes doctrine, the man behind it becomes obsolete. The Navy had learned the lesson. It no longer needed the teacher. And maybe that was enough for him, knowing that for 12 days in 1944, precision outthought chaos. 80 years later, the Hedgehog launcher that made it possible sits in the National Museum's storage room. No light, no visitors. The placard lists its caliber, its fuse type, its average kill rate. The object itself stays silent, the way it was built to be. If you lean close, the metal still smells faintly of salt. You can almost feel the ghosts of fingerprints. 19-year-olds who loaded shells in darkness and waited for math to find its mark. 6 submarines, 12 days, 335 men dead in the deep, a record untouched. The Navy wrote it down once neatly. For extraordinary heroism in action against enemy Japanese submarines. The words sit like stones, heavy but smooth, worn down by time and ceremony. What they don't say, what they can't, is that England's real battle wasn't with the submarines below, but with the disbelief above. That her weapon was never just the Hedgehog, it was the idea that data could be more faithful than instinct. And that idea, as all revolutions do, began in a room full of doubt. The destroyer Escort England no longer exists. The cruiser that carried her name no longer sails. The promise, there'll always be an England, is now just a line quoted by historians, or written in a forum comment by someone who still remembers. But maybe Admiral King wasn't wrong, only early. Because England was never just a hull, it was a principle. That truth, once proven, stays afloat even when the ship doesn't. When you close your eyes, you can still see it. A small vessel under red lights, a man tracing circles on a chart, a crew holding their breath between pings, no grand speeches, no music, just silence, and the quiet certainty that, for a moment, they understood the ocean better than anyone before or after. That's what remains. And maybe that's all history ever asks of us. Not to celebrate, but to remember. To say the names before they vanish into abbreviations. To touch the rusted metal once and imagine the hands that held it steady. To admit that sometimes progress costs more than glory can repay. If this story reaches 10,000 hands that still believe in remembering, then the promise lives again. Not as steel, not as order, but as memory. Because the sea forgets everything, unless someone, somewhere keeps telling it what to remember. And tonight, that someone is you.